Okay, so here we have that rule that we have to put into account right here. Then we have the proof that most of the fuqaha use is rufi'a al-qalam. Rufi'a al-qalam. The hadith that starts off says rufi'a al-qalam an thalatha. It says the pen has been raised off of 3 people. And then it mentions an-na'im, the person who is sleeping. The sleeping person, hatta yastayqidh, until he wakes up. Then it also mentions, after it mentions the sleeping person, it mentions the majnoon, the crazy person. And we say crazy here, the person who has lost his senses, until he gains yaqil, until he gets his intellect back. Okay? Then it also mentions the sabi, the child, so to speak. Until hatta yahtalam in one narration, in another one yakbur, until he gets older. So from this, the ulama say, okay, not with respect to the person who's sleeping, but here we have something here. So if he's not crazy, until he has his intellect. So someone who is mukallaf is someone who has, who they call rashid. He has his intellect, aqil. He understands right from wrong. Here that includes the child until he gets bigger, because once the child gets older, now it says in 2 narrations, so with these 2, how do we bring these 2 together? Yahtalam means that he has his wet dream. For the boys, this is a sign that he is now a man. Okay? And this means that he is older. Okay? Baligh. So you see from the conditions that he is baligh. He has reached the age of maturity. Then it also says yakbar, until he gets bigger. And this is the rashid. He understands right from wrong. So some of the ulama have gone on to state that nowadays, if you find a child who has not had his wet dream yet, or has not began her menses, but she understands the same things, like the rule for the woman. If she's around a small child that doesn't know about sex, and she goes uncovered a little bit, that's okay. But if you're around a child, even though that child is, let's say, 6 years old, we see these kafir children out here. They out there grinding and doing all the little Jamaican dances. No disrespect to Jamaican people, but we know what we're talking about here. They understand about sex. They understand it very, very much better than our older children who are in their teens. Okay? And some of them are having sex. No, you can't be around that child as though it's a child. That child is rashid. That child knows right from wrong. And the same, so we look at this in the same way we look at a woman who is, you're unable to kill a woman in war unless she carries a weapon. Then you have to fight her as though she's a man. Likewise, when you find the children being of the intellectual prowess to understand right from wrong, to understand what sex is, then this child is mukallaf. He is accountable. Okay? And so we don't want to play this game that people want to say, well, my child doesn't know yet. Your child knows, because you show them all these things on TV. They're here in America or other than America, where the society has MTV and all these other things. You cannot say that your children don't know about all the things that they know about. So let's just be honest with ourselves and understand these are the people who are accountable. And the pen being lifted up here means that those people are not accountable. Everybody else is accountable. And what does it mean by the pen? That there is an angel writing down for them their good deeds and their bad deeds, everything that they do, because they're going to be held accountable. We know the famous hadith about the feet of the son of Adam is not going to move on Yom Qiyamah until he's been taken account for his salah. And then other things are going to follow. Then the rest of his deeds, everything is going, illa ahsaha. Allah has brought it all and brought it down, and we're going to see it all. This is the proof, and more than that, I don't want to get into all the different proofs about that you are accountable for what you do here in this dunya. And so we need to find out what is appropriate for us to do in all of our situations. And that is the basis of this fundamental today that we're doing. Now, after establishing the point that we are mukallaf, that we are accountable, we have to find out what we are accountable for. Okay? We have to find out what are we accountable to do. And the first obligation of the abid is to get to know Rahman with Tawheed. The first obligation in Sulam Wusul ila ilm al-Tawheed wa Tibai' al-Rasul from Hafiz al-Hakami rahimahullah, he starts off, he says, أول واجب على العبيد معرفة الرحمن بالتوحيد. He says the first obligation of the abid, of the slave, is to get to know Rahman, Ar-Rahman, Allah, with Tawheed. So that's your first obligation, is to know who your Lord is. You know, we put it in the poem from Al-Akhdari. He says, the first thing that I have to do when I become accountable, mukallafun, from this here day, my actions call on me to blame, is look to see what faith demands. Have I complied with its commands? What do I think about Allah? Why is that correct? And what's the flaw? So after knowing who your Lord is, where your Lord is, and those issues of Aqeedah and Tawheed, the names of Allah, and because it's very important to study Aqeedah, and then to study also Asma'ullahis Husna, the names and attributes of Allah, because you don't know Allah until you know Him through His attributes, the way He has described Himself. And the more you get to know your Lord, the more you love your Lord, the more you give your Lord His rights, because you understand on who you're dealing with. After that, and that is called FIQH Akbar. That is the great fiqh. That is what Imam Abu Hanifa wrote about in FIQH Akbar. Okay, now the fiqh that we do in the dunya that we're talking about, fiqh al-asghar, the small fiqh, deals with what we do with our body parts, deals with what we do in our interactions, in our ibadah. So here we go into the next part of this lesson. Astaghfirullah. We have the conditions for the acceptability of a deed. Now everybody wants to understand, everybody wants to say that they're on the sunnah. Everybody. There's not a person that I've met, whether he be Sufi, Tablighi Jama'ah, or any Wardi Muhammad, or any one of the different things that there are out there, and there's more than that out there, Ikhwani, Muslimin, Salafi, or ghayr, other than that, they say they're following the sunnah. Even the Shia say they're following the sunnah. However, there are conditions, and the conditions to the acceptability of a deed being considered according to the sunnah. This is a big title. There are 6 conditions that every action must comport with, must conform with, must agree with, in order for that action to be considered an action of the sunnah. If it disagrees with this in any one of the 6 ways, that action is not an action of the sunnah. And the only reason we're going over this today, like I stated again, is because this is the foundation from which we will judge the rest of our deeds and the rest of our understanding. Okay? That's what this lesson is supposed to give you today. The objective of this lesson is to have you understand these 6 things and why they're important. Okay? The first thing is that, well, can I erase this? Should I erase this or leave it up there? Okay. The first thing is sabab. The first rule you have to have for your deed to be considered to be according to the sunnah is it has to conform and agree with the sabab, the reason why the Prophet ﷺ did it. Okay? If you have a deed, I'm going to put the 6 things right here on the side so people can see them, and then we're going to go through each one, giving an example so that we can understand. And this is something, again, this is your deen. This is something you have to know. You can't be familiar with it. You have to know it. Okay? 6 things. The first one is that your deed must agree with the sabab. Sabab, say that, guys. Sabab, that's the reason. The reason why the deed was done. Your action has to conform with that. The next thing that it has to conform with is jins. Say that too. Jins. Jins means the type of deed. Jins is the gender. That type of deed has to conform with that. The next thing is qadr. Say qadr. The qadr, the extent. Now the English is mine. Okay? Not necessarily. I've heard other ulama talk about it with these words, but what I'm saying here is you don't have to stick to these English words here. They're the best ones that I have found to express these Arabic terms. Learn the Arabic terms, and you'll understand what we're talking about a lot better. So then after we have the qadr, we have kayfiyya. Say kayfiyya. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How the deed was done. Okay? So we have the reason that deed was done, the type of deed done, the extent that that deed was done, how that deed was done. How? 3, 4. And then we have az-zaman. Az-zaman. I can't hear you. Az-zaman. The time frame. This is time frame.